Welcome back to the PFF NFL show, live from Indianapolis in the 2026 Scouting Combine. Max Chadwick, Dalton, Wasserman, Trevor, Sikkema here with you guys to do a lot of things on this show, as what happens when we get to the first show with us in Indianapolis. Of course, we had some head coaches and general managers at the podium. We got to listen to them, answer questions from the local media, the national media. So, fellas, we picked up some, I'll call them little hints. You know, we don't get a ton from these general managers, but there are little things that we think are going to matter a lot towards free agency. And then also, we're going to be reviewing the Godfather himself, Mel Kiper, released a brand new mock draft this morning. So we're going to be going through all the picks in that one and seeing what stands out. Fellas, how we doing?
Solid. It's cold in Indianapolis right now, like the Senior Bowl.
Freezing.
Every time we leave Cincinnati, it's always freezing cold. Yeah. I always think, maybe we're going to get nicer weather. It's never the case.
I love this city for hosting this
event.
It's
great.
Everything is so central. It's all very walkable. You have this, you can go to bars, you can go to restaurants afterwards, all that good stuff. So it's very central. I love Indianapolis for hosting this event. I hate the cold.
Yeah.
And it's like 20, 25 miles an hour wind like every year.
And you live in Charlotte, so you're,
Yeah, and I can't do it. The Florida blood, I can't do it.
I was going to say, spoken like a true born and raised Florida man,
yeah,
right?
Correct,
but
correct.
at least this
You're
time.
You're a little bit of a Florida man.
Yeah, a little bit, sure.
You spent some time in
But
Florida.
it's New York blood, so I'm still,
That's true.
I'm
true.
Good. And I'm certainly cold on the inside.
You can
all the
adapt.
time, so.
I don't know if I can. That's the thing.
Dalton's like like the account on Twitter is like Florida man like commits a crime, like the craziest crime. Like Dalton's a Florida man in like that respect, I would say.
So he's just a criminal, not the
the
eat part.
Yes, yeah.
Wow, we're
just lean right into it.
All right, well, so be it. I guess I'm just cold on the inside. That's where that goes. All right.
We got a lot of stuff that we want to get to, so I want to get to some of the more notable things that we got from some of the press conferences before we get to the mock draft and we break that down. Something that I'll start with number one overall, because John Spytek, the general manager of the Las Vegas Raiders, was at the podium today, and he said a couple of different things. One, he said that he expects Max Crosby on the roster next season. I don't know how much I believe that. Sure, they love to keep him, but I think Max Crosby kind of holds all the cards. I don't really think they have a lot of power there in that regard. So if he wants out, he's going to be out.
And also, if you say, we were looking to trade Max Crosby, his price goes lower.
Yeah,
so
extremely.
If you say, we want to keep him, then the price goes higher. So it's probably smokescreen.
I don't think that what he said changes sort of the situation with Max Crosby. But something that was very interesting, I think two things specifically that were interesting with John Spytek was, one, he talked about how he really does not like the idea of a rookie quarterback starting right away. And we assume that Fernando Mendoza is going to be the number one overall pick in this draft. That's been the case for mock drafts for months now. If that's the case, all right, well, it kind of sounds like maybe somebody else is going to be starting week one and not Fernando Mendoza. And the other part of this is, I don't know if it's going to be Geno Smith, because Spytek basically said, hey, now, he didn't say this as like a big negative, but it's something where, okay, you say something and your ears perk up a little bit. He said he hadn't spoken to Geno Smith yet since the offseason began. So there's not a lot of communication there between the general manager and the guy who is currently QB1 on his team. And so I think both of those things are very interesting there at the top when it comes to the Raiders and what might happen with the Mendoza situation.
Yeah, we'll see really what eventually we can infer from that, because I also think if Fernando Mendoza comes in the summer and through the preseason and shows that he is capable of starting week one, I have to think Clint Kubiak is going to want to do that, right? As long as and I think to Spytek's point, it was about trying to protect him, right? If they don't fix the offensive line this offseason, if they don't have the requisite weapons for him to succeed, then you don't want to put him in a bad position that we've seen so many quarterbacks get put in, right? You think about Cam Ward this past year at Tennessee. You think about guys like Zach Wilson and guys like that going back to his Jets days. And I mean, we see so often young quarterbacks are let down by their supporting cast. I think Spytek doesn't want that to happen to Mendoza. And a name that I would look out for, if we're assuming, I know you're going to get into this in a second, if we're assuming they're cutting Geno Smith, the name I would look at is Kirk Cousins, because that's been established today that he will not be back in Atlanta. They're going to release him, and they will not re-sign him. So Kirk Cousins and the connection previously in Minnesota with Clint Kubiak, that could be a big one there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a connection to watch, especially because when you look at Geno Smith's contract, whether he's cut before June 1 or afterwards, it's the same. It doesn't matter. They take on an $18.5 million dead cap hit, but on the grand scheme of things, they still save $8 million. Yeah. So there's a reality where they could very well be moving on from Geno Smith. You still feel good about because they're a team that's got a lot of money to work with in free agency. So you could go out and get a quarterback that you feel good about, especially a veteran like Kirk Cousins, who, Kirk's not going to be taking Fernando Mendoza's meaningful reps. Whenever that guy's ready, like you mentioned, they're going to play him. But I think that's an interesting scenario to watch out for. New York Jets, okay, at number 2, this is a little less meaningful for number 2 overall, but Darren Muji said that Breece Hall will be back with the New York Jets, whether they re-sign him or they put the tag on him, the franchise tag on him. They will be bringing Breece Hall back. I'm going to be honest, I don't like the move, and the reason why I don't like it is because, not that I don't think that Breece Hall is a good football player, I do, but if you're the Jets, you just traded Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams away. Yeah. You are 2 years realistically away from hitting a winning window. Maybe it's 3. So if in reality you're going to be signing Breece Hall to probably at most a 3-year contract, 2/3 of that contract, the first 2 years, when you're probably paying him the most money, you're not going to be that competitive. So why would you do that at the running back position? So I understand wanting to hold on to somebody who's a fan favorite. And look, they need offensive weapons on offense, so they're not really in the business of letting those guys walk. But that's not a move that I would make if I was the Jets.
I wouldn't either, and I'm completely with you, Trevor. I mean, listen, he has been one of the 10 highest graded running backs in 2 of the last 3 years, but you mentioned it before. I mean, he's a running back. He's a really good one at that, but also this is a Jets team that probably won't be competing for a Super Bowl within the next 3 or so years.
I mean, I'm not even talking about Super Bowl. I'm just talking about competing in general. I mean,
exactly.
You look at how well the Patriots bounced back this year. The Bills are still what they are with Josh Allen. I mean, you're competing for, like, 3rd in that division right now.
There's a deadline of March 3rd to get this long-term deal done. If not, Darren Muji did say they will place a tag on Breece Hall, whether it be a franchise tag, whether it be a transition tag. We don't know just yet, but they will be tagging Breece Hall if they can't get a long-term deal done. So it does not sound like Breece Hall will be really a free agent this offseason.
And something you've talked about a lot is kind of the mentality of this current coaching staff with the Jets. You think about everything we've seen the last month or so, and then even that we've heard today, right? You talk about Aaron Glenn taking over defensive play calling himself.
Right.
Talk about turning over basically the entire coaching staff, and now Frank Reich is the new OC. Now tagging Breece Hall. It sure feels like, and we'll see what the quarterback situation looks like too, possibly in the first round. It feels like this coaching staff is trying to find some more wins this year in order to survive into 2027.
Which I get. I hate operating like that, right? But I suppose I get it. But it's always tough when you look at what maybe is the best long-term decision for the team versus what kind of gets you wins in the short term, and you're prioritizing that because obviously a lot of the people that are making the roster decisions are probably the ones whose butts are on the line because they got to win right away. So it's one of those things where it's very easy for me to say here at this desk this table, excuse me, but it's easy for me to say that because my job's not on the line there, but from an outsider's perspective, again, I don't like the move. I think that you're going to be paying a lot of money for a player to not really be a difference maker for you when it comes to the grand scheme of things.
And like Dalton said earlier, this is a franchise that probably is going to try to win as many games as possible next year in order to keep their jobs, which is why I keep thinking Ty Simpson at number 16 overall is a possibility. I think if you go into next year, you have nothing at quarterback, and you're one of the worst teams in the league once again, I don't know if this regime will get another chance to draft a quarterback in 2027.
Is this a team that could be like, obviously everybody talks about Malik Willis as the potential, player to add in this quarterback free agent class, but Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, Kyler Murray, to be honest with you, that's a good transition into another quote that we had, which is Monty Ossenford, the general manager for the Arizona Cardinals, said that all options are on the table with Kyler Murray, and they have 20 days left as of today to decide whether or not he's on the roster because he gets $17 million if he's on the roster 20 days from now. So they're having all sorts of conversations, but whether they find a trade partner for him or not, I don't think they're going to with that contract. There's going to be quarterback options that are out there. Yeah. So it's almost like is Kyler Murray somebody that the Jets could potentially go after? Because I think that's the biggest fish.
I think absolutely. I mean, he's shown when he's healthy, he is at least he's a viable starter. Obviously struggled last year, and he struggled with injuries throughout his career. But we've seen in flashes where Kyler Murray can be a solid starter in this league. And at some point, maybe the Jets, they just want that in the short term, right? If they don't like anybody in this quarterback class, especially to spend a top 50 pick on, because they do have 4 of them, but they have a ton of needs on their roster as well outside outside of basically offensive line and running back, Jets have all those needs. So Kyler Murray could be somebody. And then I think Arizona's situation gets interesting. And I think them and even the Miami Dolphins are two very interesting teams that we heard from today with similar quarterback situations. Right?
Yes.
Kyler Murray and Tua. And honestly, I think those are the two teams that are going to be bidding for Malik Willis. You have a lot of connections with Miami and Willis, and Arizona just needs a quarterback. And we don't think they're going to take 1/3 overall, but what's going to be available to them in the second round maybe. So Arizona's very much caught in between there as well.
I wonder if there's a world where this kind of turns into a little bit of like a Brock Osweiler type of a trade, like where I can't really see anybody trading straight up for Kyler's contract the way that it is. But if the Jets, who are sitting here with 2 first-round picks this year, 2 second-round picks this year, 2 third-round picks the next year, do they say to the Cardinals, like, we'll trade you something for Murray? Like, maybe it's a second-round pick this year, or maybe it's a first-round pick next year, but it's like, you got to take on a lot of the money, though. We'll give you the draft capital, but you got to take on a ton of the money in order for that to be the case, to find a suitor.
And that's always the part where if I'm all the other teams, the prospective suitors when it comes to Murray, and looking at the Cardinals situation, I would just sit back and wait. I would just wait for them to cut him.
Yeah.
Unless you mention that you're basically getting him for almost nothing at that point.
Right.
Yeah, I would sit and wait it out as long as I could.
Another headline, I think that was sort of a headline, is we talk about 2 notable wide receivers. One of them is A.J. Brown. We've talked about him potentially being on the trade block over the last year. It feels like that's more uncertain than ever. It just did not feel like he was... I know he was kind of hurt, but it just didn't feel like he had that same fire playing this year, no matter when it was throughout the season. And there was talk of him getting traded at the trade deadline, but he was never going to get traded at the trade deadline because it would have been so financially hampering for the Philadelphia Eagles. It's a little bit easier this offseason to be able to move on from him. Nick Sirianni kind of made it feel like it was a little bit more up in the air. Howie Roseman was the one who was more like, no, we're not trying to trade good players. We're trying to win football games, which I understand. But A.J. Brown and then also DJ Moore. I think DJ Moore is another player who Ryan Poles, this was his quote on DJ Moore, we want him here. We think very highly of him, but this is the time right now where we have to look at all the scenarios that will allow us to put the best team out there. He's a guy that we want here, but we have to take a look at all of the scenarios. When you look at a team that has Rome Odunze, has Luther Burden, has Colston Loveland, you look at a situation like DJ Moore where, Chicago's trying to compete, but I think DJ Moore is on the market for the right price. So those are 2 wide receivers that could be big-time difference-making players, maybe for a team like the Jets, maybe for a team like the Las Vegas Raiders, right? These teams that really need offensive firepower where maybe these teams could be interested in guys.
And the Bears are in a unique scenario, too, where if you trade a star receiver like DJ Moore, usually they'll really deplete your receiving core. Like you just mentioned, Trev, they have stars. Like they have Rome Odunze, they have Luther Burden, they have Colston Loveland. Now they're all young players, but they're building a young core right now in Chicago. So I do think a DJ Moore trade is on the table. The A.J. Brown was a little interesting because Howie Roseman was like, no, we're not really interested in subtracting great players. We're trying to get better, and subtracting great players is not going to do that. But then Nick Sirianni is like, I can't guarantee he's going to be back next year. So a little conflicting right there. So we'll see what happens in Philadelphia. But DJ Moore one was very interesting for sure.
Yeah, and I think that you throw Brandon Ayuk's name obviously in that conversation as well. Like, if you need a wide receiver next year, there are guys, Tyreek Hill, I don't know what the knee situation is like for him, but there are wide receivers that are out there that can be had for teams that really need to pump up their offensive weapons.
I think the situation for those 2 teams in particular, Philly and Chicago, they're very different though when you look at what it would cost them to trade each of these players, right? Mm-hmm. It does not financially help Philadelphia at all in any way to trade A.J. Brown, right? It really actually hurts their salary cap to trade him, and I think the big offensive move that obviously was made this offseason was changing offensive coordinators, right? Getting Sean Mannion in there. And maybe that was part of it, is that A.J. Brown, we know sometimes he can be kind of fickle when it comes to the play calling and really disagreeing with that. So maybe getting Sean Mannion in there as the offensive coordinator can help that. Whereas with the Bears and DJ Moore, look, they spent a lot of money in the offseason last year in free agency, especially on that offensive line, but they're going to need some money to fix that defense, right? They got some guys they need to retain. They really need to improve on defense. Moore would give them more financial flexibility if they were to trade him, plus a very deep receiver class. I don't think they'd have any issue replacing him, say maybe on day 2 with another guy from this class.
Teams that could be interested in wide receivers like that, like if Moore becomes available, obviously A.J. Brown's a little bit trickier because you'll have to sweeten the pot to make it worth it for the Eagles, who are taking a pretty good financial burden there. But You look at the Steelers. Steelers got 12 projected picks in this class. Like, they need another wide receiver. Could DJ Moore, or I don't think AJ Brown, but like DJ Moore is one of those guys where I wonder if they call up Chicago and they're making a deal to get DJ Moore over there. Like, independent of working out some of the finer details. Are there any other teams? Like I mentioned, the Raiders, kind of one of them. The Jets obviously, but like any other teams that really come to mind that need a receiver?
I think for Moore, especially Brown, the contract makes it a little bit difficult. But you want DJ Moore, I think about two teams that could use another weapon like that. The two teams that played in the Super Bowl, New England and Seattle, they both got a good amount of cap space. New England, I believe, has 11 draft picks, and they could use another weapon, just keep adding to that offense around Drake May. And Seattle, if they're going to lose Rashid Shaheed free agency, I think another big play threat like DJ Moore would really help their offense and keep that momentum going for Sam Darnold.
I like it, Max. And I mean, you nodded at the Jets, obviously, as a team. Like the Falcons are another team that needs a wide receiver, So
I don't know about Baltimore because they have an interesting cap situation, but Baltimore, I think, could always add more weapons around Lamar Jackson, too. And I mean, there's a lot of talk about them and Tyler Linderbaum today, which I thought was really fascinating, too, with Eric DeCosta saying that they're going to send him like a market-setting offer, which is really fascinating, I think. But I think the Ravens are always a team that I'm always looking at saying they need to add one more receiver, I think, to that. Zay Flowers and even DeAndre Hopkins had a good bounce-back year this year, too. But I think Baltimore would be a really interesting spot, too.
A couple more rapid-fire points. You mentioned the Linderbaum one, where Eric DeCosta talked about how, I don't know if he said the offer was out already, like they've given him the offer, but it was a market-setting offer for Tyler Linderbaum. It feels as though he is going to stay a member of the Baltimore Ravens, regardless of him really hitting free agency. Another point of news, Nnamdi Madubuike back at the facility, was asked about that, but Jesse Minter kind of said, like, hey, I don't really have a timetable for you. He'll come back when he's ready to come back. And anytime that you've got a neck or a spine injury, it's just always very touchy. You just never know. But for him to be back at the facility, I think, is a really good sign there for the Ravens.
I think the Linderbaum situation is fascinating because this is a situation with interior offensive linemen where the franchise tag for offensive linemen is the same, regardless of position.
Yeah.
Which basically puts the salary commensurate with offensive tackles, right?
Yes.
So that offer, if that offer is already on the table and Linderbaum hasn't accepted it already, I think you have a situation where the Ravens, they're gonna really have to compete to keep him because I think there's teams like the Chargers, like the Raiders, like the New York Giants, I think all those teams are going to be extreme.
Good point.
His market is going to be, when he hits the open market in a couple weeks, it's going to be an outstanding
good
market.
O-linemen just don't hit the market.
Right, but interior guys with less of a threat of the franchise tag, like that, we already know that's not happening.
Yeah.
I think he's going to test the open market. I think the Ravens are really going to have to fight to keep him.
For anyone wondering, a market-setting offer, Creed Humphrey is the highest-paid center in the league right now at $18 million a year. So we could be seeing like a $19-20 million.
It's
going to be
$20 million center.
Yeah. Especially for how valuable that position is when you're really, really good at it. That's a good point. A couple of other rapid-fire points. Brad Holmes, the general manager of the Detroit Lions, talked about how Tate Ratledge could be moving back to center. So if the Lions, when we talk about offensive line needs for them, it's less of center, maybe more of guard if they feel comfortable with Ratledge playing that center position. The Browns said that it is an open quarterback competition. And one of the names in there, of course, is Dylan Gabriel, it's Shedeur Sanders, but also Deshaun Watson's name was in there. So it's an open competition for who's going to start in Cleveland. They talked about how DeJuan Jones is on the right track to be healthy when the season opens, which is big for them given how many potential holes that they could have on that offensive line that they have to replace. Marshawn Lattimore, Adam Peters, the general manager for the Washington Commanders, I didn't exactly give a great vote of confidence that Marshawn Lattimore is going to be with them next year, so could be a cap casualty there with them cutting and moving on from Marshawn Lattimore. So just a couple of rapid-fire points. Any thoughts on those or anything else that you kind of heard?
Did you see Nick Caserio, what he said about the C.J. Stroud trade rumors?
He
called him, quote, moronic. Yeah,
moronic.
He's like, he is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So anyone wondering if C.J. Stroud would get traded this offseason, that is not happening. He will be a Houston Texan
next year.
That was
not going to happen.
I think Cleveland's situation, and look, the quarterback battle really doesn't matter who wins it until they fix the offensive line and then improve the receiving core as well. So I think the offensive line for them, especially with 2 first-round picks and, trying to find some value, especially maybe some younger value in the free agent market, it's going to be interesting to see how they can rebuild that offensive line. Because, again, I don't care if it's Deshaun Watson or Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel or somebody else. Maybe they draft some. It doesn't matter if you can't block people. This entire offseason needs to be about offensive line and wide receiver in Cleveland.
I agree 100%. Every week on Draft Risers, folks, we highlight players climbing up draft boards as teams get deeper into their evaluation process, like here at the Combine. These are the guys that are rising because decision makers are getting more confident in the full profile, not just chasing some of the traits, although, to be honest, guys, a player that, to chase the traits, Caleb Banks, the defensive tackle from Florida, I think has been on the rise over the last couple of weeks. He had a really great showing at the Senior Bowl, was able to get out there, remind people of why he was considered a top 15 overall pick going into this season. He dealt with the injury where he didn't get to play a lot for Florida this year because of the foot injury, but if the medicals check out for him, dude, he is 6'6", 330 pounds, got those 35-inch arms. They just don't make him like Caleb Banks. So I think that he has been a big-time riser over the last couple of weeks. And if he does all of the testing, I think he's going to test like a really good athlete, especially for a player of his size. So he is going to be that riser. When you're trying to identify risers like that, it's not about guessing. It's about having better tools, better data, and a better process. That same approach applies when you are making decisions about your own money. If you want to make smarter picks with your portfolio, Tasty Trade gives you the advanced tools and data to do so. You could trade stocks, options, futures, and more, all on one platform. The platform includes back testing and risk analysis tools to help you plan ahead and manage that risk. You can get live support from Tasty Trade's experienced trade desk reps during trading hours. Tasty Trade platform has won awards from TradingView, Stockbrokers.com, Investors Business Daily, Bankrate, Investopia, and so much more there. You can create custom watch lists as well for specific sectors, companies, or market views. Visit tastytrade.com/PFF today. Tasty Trade Incorporated is a registered broker-dealer and member of FINRA, NFA, and SIPC. With that, let's dig into mock drafts. Let's get some mock draft madness here. The legend himself, Mel Kiper, dropped his second mock draft of the year, so we figured we do enough mock drafts here on this show. Let's take a look outside the walls of PFF and do a little analyzing ourselves. And I took a look at this mock draft before we knew that we were going to do this part for the show, and I haven't gotten through all of it, but it's pretty hot.
It's a fun one.
This is a fun one. This mock's pretty hot. Now, it's no different at the very top. We've got Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback from Indiana, going number 1 overall to the Las Vegas Raiders. That's not a surprise. But, Dalton, I got to start with you here at number 2. This is your New York Jets going with a player that you love in this class, but there's some debate on the value. Safety Caleb Downs from Ohio State. Is the value right for him in this draft class at number 2 overall? Do you feel good about Kyper's pick here?
I do, honestly. I think for me, this pick would either be Caleb Downs or Ruben Bain. I think you could easily argue that
you were making the pick, you're saying, personally.
I think you could argue that Caleb Downs is the best football player in this draft.
I think I would agree with that.
Such a clean prospect, such a high football IQ. He can play any role in your defense. And look, we've seen this lately, right? Derwin James, Kyle Hamilton, Nicky Menwari, these safeties that come in. And I know he might not be the athletic freak necessarily that those guys are, but Caleb Downs' football intelligence is so hard to pass up. He can be an immediate leader of your defense. He's a clean tackler despite being a little bit smaller than those guys. And coverage grades above 85 in all 3 of his college seasons playing at Alabama and Ohio State. I mean, just a freakish talent, even if it doesn't show up necessarily with the measurables here this week. I would argue he's the best football player in this draft. I have no issue with this.
Yeah, our grades would back that up. 93.6 overall grade for Caleb Downs' career. I love this, honestly. It actually would tie the highest drafted safety in the modern era, as Mel Kiper points out, with Eric Turner back in 1991. We had one safety go number 1 overall back in the 50s, but that wasn't the modern era of the NFL draft.
Sure.
In the modern era,
since the merger, it would tie the record since the merger.
It's worth it though. In this class, where there's not a lot of top end blue chip talent, I think Caleb Downs, who is, in my opinion, the closest thing to a can't miss in this draft. I mean, he's worth as high of a pick as you can take.
It's going to be very interesting to see how he tests here in Indianapolis and what the narrative around him is afterwards, because I think there's some rumblings that he's going to test like a good athlete, but it's not going to be an elite athlete. You take non-elite athletes in the top 3. I think you're going to hear a lot of people, and you're going to maybe a lot of teams will agree with the fact that you don't. But I agree with you. I think there's a good chance he is the number 1 overall player on my board when it's all said and done. I think he is the best player in this draft class, and I keep going back to the fact that Nick Saban, who is a defensive back at heart, right? That is his roots. That is his bread and butter. Caleb Downs started as a true freshman for Nick Saban in his defense, and then he played in Matt Patricia's as well this past season, and he was an impactful player, like you mentioned, throughout.
And Trev, like you mentioned before, Nick Saban doesn't really trust true freshmen to start for him in that secondary.
Never.
I mean, guys who do
Titans, he's got Arvil Reese, the linebacker from Ohio State, going there at number 4. Any thoughts on either of those? Reuben Bain's not either of those names, and we'll get to Reuben Bain a little bit later in the mock draft, obviously, but the Cardinals going with David Bailey over the rest of, I'll throw even Arvil Reese into there, that conversation of guys that could potentially go there at number 3.
I think another impact player in their front 7 makes sense in one form or another. Now they have struggled at linebacker the last couple of years, so Reese would make some sense if they leave him at linebacker, but also you've got 2 edge defenders, Baron Browning and Zaven Collins, entering the final year of the contract in 2026 as well, so an edge rusher might make some sense here. They've been building that defensive line the last couple of years, but Cardinals got a lot of needs in the trenches, right? D-line, O-line, either way, I think they could take either, and I could see it making sense.
Well, I think that's the real question here, because I think that we've talked ad nauseum about how good these guys are and what they could bring to the table here, but for the Cardinals specifically, I think their offensive line needs a lot bigger than their defensive line. ESPN.com, which of course you guys can go over and read. The first sentence is tough call here between Bailey and Ohio State's Arvil Reese. So very clearly, he's not considering offensive line at this. What do you think about a true best player available approach here, given how big the Cardinals' offensive line needs it? Do you like it? Will you make this pick as well?
Maybe not David Bailey, but I understand it, because I think they have so many needs on this roster right now. You can't just pigeonhole and say, oh, well, they need this, they got to take this. And I like the tackles in this draft. I won't like him at number 3 overall. I can say it right now. I think David Bailey, listen, he's the best pass rusher. I think the nation in pass rush grade last year at Stanford, led the nation in pass rush grade this year at Texas Tech, and for a Cardinals defense at the 3rd worst pass rushing grade in the league this year, it makes sense. Again, not the player I would take here personally, but I at least understand the thinking here.
I think, too, this is the part where draft decisions you have to look at. You mentioned defensive line is so deep, right? Offensive tackle is not as deep. So you think about, what can I get an elite player right now and still feel good about, say, early in round 2 at pick 34? There's going to be some really good defensive linemen. I don't trust the offensive line in that range as much. So if you were to extend this mock draft out and make, say, a 3-round plan or even a 7-round plan, you go, okay, I feel better about what I could get in round 2 and 3 on the defensive line. Whereas if I take, say, a Francis Mauanoa 3rd overall, I feel really good right tackle, instant starter. Plus, I'll get quality D linemen later.
And that's where I get nervous. Like, not to skip over certain picks, but he's got Arvil Reese going to the Titans at 4. He has Spencer Fano, the offensive tackle from Utah, going to the New York Giants at number 5. But then you get to the Cleveland Browns, he's got them taking Carnell Tate, the wide receiver from Ohio State. I think the conversation with the Browns is very similar to that of the Arizona Cardinals. Like, they ideally would like to take an offensive lineman at 3 and at 6. And I think when you try to build out that full team building strategy going into the 2nd round, you're not going to love the offensive line options that are going to be available for you at the beginning of the 2nd round. So it almost, again, like, I agree with you, Max. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself, but at the same time, like, these teams, if they don't get significantly higher floors in free agency with the offensive linemen that they could bring in, they're going to have major roster problems if they don't address the offensive line.
And to your point, too, I think, in my personal opinion, this tackle class has a big drop-off after the first 3 guys in Proctor, Mauanoa, and Fano to everyone else. I don't think any of those 3 guys are making it to 24 for Cleveland either. And I think there's some really good receivers you can get at number 24 overall.
Right. I think for Proctor, it kind of depends on this week, right?
I think he's going to have a big week this week and go even higher than where he's projected right now. But
I'll say this too for the Browns case, okay? They're replacing possibly their entire offensive line. So when you look at 24, interior guys are not off the board either. We'll see if Venga Ioane can get to 24, but also I think Emmanuel Pregnon from Oregon might be a late first round type of player. If the Browns got him at 24 and you
get Sonny Styles, the linebacker from Ohio State, going to the Washington Commanders at number 7. It's been reported, Jordan Schultz reported this, that Bobby Wagner is going to be agent, so it could be elsewhere on a different team. But they're going off-ball linebacker there in the top 10. We've got Mekhi Lemon, the wide receiver from USC, going to New Orleans Saints at number 8. How do we feel about Lemon? It feels like this get a little bit more steam with them taking a
receiver in this class. I get the size concerns and all that, but you look at guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and how they're dominating the league right now. I think Mekhi Lemon's one of those guys, honestly. I think he's the best receiver in the draft, and I love him going in the top 10 here to New Orleans.
It adds so much more schematically to that offense, right? Because Lemon can take those easy targets and turn them into big plays.
He blocks his butt off, too.
He blocks his butt off. He's going to help the run game. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Saints that they either take another receiver to pair with Chris Olave, or I still think Jeremiah Love should be on the board very high for them at number 8 to jumpstart the run game. But either way, I think it'd be a really good pick. And Lemon, like you mentioned, he's our top guy. He's awesome.
Well, Jeremiah Love goes right after this. So I want to hear your thoughts on this. Kansas City going Jeremiah Love. We've seen this mock draft connection before. Did a little social video for the PFF channel, whatever, defensive players in this class. It's kind of depending on how. I think that's because he's right there with what a good athlete. I could very well give him the blue chip label just because of how smart and how impactful of a football player that he is. But athleticism does matter a lot at the NFL level.
I would be surprised if he tests even average. I think he'll be a good athlete.
If he's that, I'll probably say that there's 2 blue chip players in this class. But I know for sure there's at least one.
Fair.
And it's Jeremiah Love. And I think that's when people ask me about, hey, do you take one in the top 10? Where's the value? That's the blue chip player in this class.
And with Breece Hall going back to New York, with a huge drop-off after Jeremiah Love to the rest of this running back class, too, it's kind of the thing, too, where you're like, there's not another running back worth taking
New Orleans
in the second round.
All right, here's a question. So he obviously goes number 9 here to the Kansas City Chiefs. You guys like Lemon more or Love more for the Saints at 8?
You could easily argue with the scarcity part that you just mentioned that Love should go 8 to the Saints.
Go 8.
And they can find a receiver later, right? Because there's a depth of receiver that there isn't. I'll tell you, the 2 happiest guys in football right now, college and NFL, Jeremiah Love and Kenneth Walker. Why? Because Breece Hall is going to be a New York Jet, and Javonte Williams just signed an extension in Dallas, right? So now Kenneth Walker is the main free agent at that position, and Jeremiah Love is obviously the main running back in this class. Those 2 guys, I think Jeremiah Love is going top 10, especially with those moves.
He's too good.
And Hall
He's
and
too
Williams
good.
not going anywhere. Yeah, absolutely. And Kenneth Walker is going to make a bunch of money, whether it's from Seattle or elsewhere, because the market's already slimming down.
And you know what's interesting about that is Dallas is picking 12th. Right? And I know that they like Javon. They go, there's no shot. We don't have a shot at getting Jeremiah Love. And with that being the case, let's make sure that we bring back Javonte. Right? If there was a chance they could get Jeremiah Love, I don't know if that Javonte happy. Last team in the top 10 to round things out here, Ruben Bain Jr. lasting all the way to number 10, going to the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, it's interesting because the Bengals have drafted a couple of edge rushers over the last few seasons. Shamar Stewart, obviously, is the one that they drafted last year in the first round. Is this more of an interior defensive line pick, to be honest with you? Like, do you think that if he goes to Cincinnati, is he playing more interior defensive line than anything else?
That's the fun with Bain is you can kind of move him around, right? And I know there's some people who have thought that, okay, he should play a 3 technique. He can be a defensive tackle, right? Like that responsibility, the guy who can do a little bit of both. Honestly, if Bain gets to the Bengals at 10, that's an A+ run it in home run pick, no question, because we're assuming Trey Hendrickson's going to leave, right? So now it's like, so you have needs at all 3 levels of your defense. I would argue cornerback is maybe the only one that's not a consideration there, but Ruben Bain getting a 10 would be a slam dunk.
Didn't they say they might tag Henderson again?
I might take Bain anyway then. Really. Especially, you mentioned the flexibility. Like if Al Golden wants to go to 5-man fronts and you've got Stewart and Bain, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, we might actually have a run defense.
Yeah, I mean, and very clearly if you're tagging Henderson, that's not really solving a lot. Like he's probably still mad. He's around for 1 more year maximum, right? So, no, I don't think that takes it away. But it's just a very interesting landing spot because, one, I hadn't seen Bain last to 10 in many mock drafts anyways. Like, I think he could go 2 to the Jets. So for him to last all the way to 10, I think is a bit of a stretch. But him with Cincinnati is interesting depending on how multiple they want to get. But I genuinely think that if he gets drafted to Cincinnati, they're drafting him more as an interior defensive lineman than an edge rusher.
I think in that scenario, with Reese off the board, with Styles off the board, with Bailey off the board, right?
Downs is off the board.
Downs is off the board.
Basically,
Bain being the last guy on the board, you almost have to take him there if you're Cincinnati.
It's basically just Peter Woods is the only one left still on the board that I think you would think about. Right.
Yeah.
At 10.
Yeah, but I'd certainly go Bain over Woods.
I think Bain's like the 3rd best player in this draft.
I agree. I agree.
I think it's a slam dunk pick for Cincinnati. I mean, he led the nation in pressures this year. I think he's the best run defending edge we have in this draft too. So I think he's a superstar. I have no qualms with that pick at all.
All right, we'll run through some of the picks in Mel Kiper's most recent mock here outside of the top 10. But before we get to that, our game plan of the week presented by our friends over at Western and Southern Financial Group. A game plan for your financial future. Fellas, you know what I think the game plan of the week is? Just because Fernando Mendoza is going number 1 overall doesn't mean you have to start him week 1. I think that's the game plan of the week. Don't throw these guys out there before they're ready. And that was Spytek's whole thing when he was talking at the podium. He was saying, look, if he's ready to go, great. But too many times he used the quote, at his podium, he said too many times, it's organizations that fail quarterbacks before the quarterbacks fail the organization. And so to me, I love that. I love that game plan that Spytek has there, and I think that that's perfect to try to set his young quarterback up for the most success throughout his entire career, not just for the Raiders in the short term, maybe in year one. Just like every team win starts with a great game plan, your future should as well. With life insurance built like a championship roster, Western and Southern helps you protect you and your family so you can focus on winning today, knowing that tomorrow is covered. Whether you are just starting out building your dynasty or looking to lock in long-term protection, their coverage options are designed to match your game plan. Visit westernsouthern.com/PFF to get your free life quote and start building your financial game plan today. Western and Southern, built to win, backed by over 130 years of helping people protect what matters most.
You know what my game plan of the week is, Trev?
All you can eat steak tonight?
I was going to say hydrate, but that's also
I think both probably
for
good.
Sure. Both would be
probably
good
good for
ideas,
us. I'll go a little bit rapid fire with some of these here. Miami Dolphins, Francis Maui-Noah. That's what Mel Kiper has them taking at number 11. Mansour Delane, the corner from LSU, to the Dallas Cowboys at 12. The Rams getting Jermod McCoy, the cornerback from Tennessee, at number 13. Baltimore Ravens getting Jordan Tyson, the wide receiver from Arizona State, at number 14. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers getting C.J. Allen, the linebacker from Georgia. That's the highest I've seen C.J. Allen go in a mock draft.
Just shows you how bad the Bucs need linebackers. Huh?
They do, and both Jason Light and Todd Bowles, when they were at their podium sessions, basically said as much. Like, they basically were like, we're drafting a linebacker and edge rusher in the first round. Like, that's again, I'm paraphrasing, I'm reading between the lines type of a thing, but they know they desperately need it. Todd Bowles said that they need to get bigger on defense. That was a focus of his. And then somebody asked him specifically about Savasier Dennis potentially being a starter down the road, and it wasn't like an emphatic, like, oh yeah, I think he could. He was like, he's got to get way better as an open field defender. And he was very honest with it. So whether or not Levante David even comes back, I think that if Sonny Styles is off the board, C.J. Allen is a legitimate option for the Buccaneers there at number 15. Any thoughts on Tyson to the Ravens, McCoy to the Rams, Delane to the Cowboys, Maui-Noah to the Dolphins?
You got the two big injury stories there, right? When you talk about Jordan Tyson getting to 14 for the Rams, and he's not going to participate in any drills or testing here because of his hamstring injury.
Makes me nervous.
It makes you wonder if he's going to go even lower than that. And then Jermon McCoy is a huge story, right? Coming off the torn ACL, didn't play at all. I think he would be a home run pick for the Rams there at 13. Corners, obviously their biggest need, as long as he's healthy enough, right? There's nobody here with medical exams that are more important than Jermod McCoy coming out of Tennessee.
I think, I'm going to be honest with you, I think Tyson could go in the second round. I think he could fall all the way to the second round.
It's a long list.
You've got an extensive injury history that starts with a really bad knee injury he had his freshman year, recovered from the knee injury the second year, so didn't play a full season, collarbone injury the next season, hamstring injury this season, which he still has not recovered from 3 months after the season is over. It's a soft tissue injury. You don't love that. The NFL does not draft damaged goods very high. And unless a doctor looks at him and goes, yeah, he's fine, it's just a hamstring thing, he'll be good to go, he's good to go by training camp. Unless he gets a unanimous, emphatic thumbs up from the medical doctors here, I genuinely think for as talented as Jordan Tyson is, he could go in the second round of this draft.
Yeah, and we did our wide receivers episode recently, and I had Tyson wide receiver 4 and took some heat for it, and it's because of the injury history. I love the player. It's just, unfortunately, the injuries have been...
There is a world where he's the fourth wide receiver drafted.
There's been such a major storyline throughout his entire career. Every single year, it's not the same injury either. It's a different injury every single time. Yep. So it's unfortunately a major part of his evaluation right now, but it certainly is a big part of it.
For sure. I mean, and then those other two picks that you have there, Maui-Noah to the Dolphins, I think makes a ton of sense, right?
Low moving cost.
Low moving cost, indeed.
Same stadium, no moving cost.
No moving cost.
Have to go anywhere, right?
Yeah, so he stays in the same apartment.
For him, I think it would be the idea on that team of moving inside the guard, right? I think he could be a fantastic guard as well, guard or tackle. I think either way. I think Maui-Noah is the best offensive lineman in this draft.
I agree
and I
with
think the fact that you have that flexibility is great. And then Mansour Delane for the Cowboys, that's just a home run.
Yeah, it is.
That's one of the easiest picks in the draft.
Gives you a lot of flexibility. I think that honestly, like McCoy, his spot with the Rams is also phenomenal. Yeah. I rewatched a lot of the top corners for their full evals for the draft guide stuff on PFF.com recently, and I think McCoy's the best corner in this class. I don't think anybody's corner tape was as good as McCoy's was before he got injured the year before.
I cannot wait to see him doing drills this week.
I hope he flies, man. Yeah. I hope he absolutely flies. The next 5 picks that we have here in Kyper's 2.0 mock draft, Jets back on the clock, so they took Caleb Downs at number 2, Peter Woods, the defensive tackle from Clemson, there at number 16. 17, this is the highest I've seen Zion Young, the edge rusher from Missouri, going to the Lions to play opposite Aiden Hutchinson. Your boy Dylan Thieneman going number 18 overall to the Minnesota Vikings. Carolina Panthers getting Keldrick Falk, the edge rusher from Auburn. And then Dallas Cowboys taking Akeem Mesidor, my boy, the edge rusher from Miami. So thoughts on any of those picks there?
I'll tell you, if Dallas were to walk away from this draft with Mansour Lane and Akeem Mesidor, they're getting things right.
You are a much better football team on the defensive side.
The top 3 linebackers, they're off the board, so they can attack either secondary again or another edge rusher like Mesidor.
And they got plenty of time to get a linebacker.
Absolutely. There's some good
I know they don't
day
have.
two
I
guys
know
in
it's
this
they
class.
have the first 2 picks, and I don't think they have a second or a third round pick. But like, you could get a linebacker in this draft early on day 3 and feel decently good about it.
It's one of the best linebacker classes I've ever seen since I've been scouting in like the last 6 or 7 years.
It's as deep
really
as it gets.
It's really deep. It's some top end talent this year too. So I love that. The Jets getting Peter Woods is fun. I think, in fact, Peter Woods, my comp for him going into the season, Trev, was Quinnen Williams. So they're kind of replacing Quinnen Williams with hopefully the next Quinnen Williams. So I think Peter Woods would be a really fun fit. I think his guy is getting a little underrated right now. I think the Clemson defensive line and how they used him this past year, they stunted more than almost any other defense in college football. That kind of limited a lot of the opportunities for one-on-one pass rushing wins for Peter Woods. So I think his tape at Clemson this past year was more, he got like a 70 PFF grade, was a career low. I think I'm more to do with the environment at Clemson than anything else.
Totally agree. Especially when you look at down years from everybody. Like, TJ Parker had a down year.
Oh, I'm well aware.
Avian Terrell had a down year. Like, what'd you say?
I'm well aware. I was picking them to win the national.
Oh yeah, I didn't.
Max
mean to.
Chadwick had a down year. Yeah.
Matt Chadwick did, but hey, we're on the up. Peter Woods' stock is back on the up. Zion Young going to the Lions. I mean, I think that's a product of how good of a Senior Bowl showing that he had, where his stock is really on the rise. Your thoughts on Thieneman, the fit, your boy, the fit to the Minnesota Vikings there to replace Harrison Smith?
That feels like a pretty good fit to replace Harrison Smith, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about the versatility that he has, the speed that he has. I'm really interested to see him test out here at the Combine as well, because we've even had some debates about, okay, what does Dylan Thieneman's athleticism really look like? But man, oh man, he's an instinctive football player. He's aggressive, and playing that 1 year at Oregon, I think that really helped him become more versatile in his game to play any sort of role, and we know that's what Harrison Smith was known for, being able to run any scheme, any coverage, and do it at a very high level.
I think he's going to rise this week at the Combine. Dylan Thieneman. I think he's going to test really, really well. I don't think people are really aware of how athletic Dylan Thieneman was, because he played a lot in the box this year at Oregon. When he played like center field at Purdue in his freshman year especially, he was like clocking in over 20 miles per hour consistently in our tracking data.
I thought there was another reason you were going to say people don't think he's athletic, but
no, there's no other reason.
Just because
no other reason. My comp, by the way, is not Harrison Smith.
No,
that's not my comp.
No, not Harrison Smith. Literally any other safety.
Yeah, literally anyone. Yeah, exactly.
For Dylan Thieneman, who is a damn good football player. I think Carolina Panthers fans might look at the pick for Keldrick Falk, the edge rusher from Auburn, and some of them might roll their eyes. Some of them might not be happy about it, because you look at the single-digit pass rush win percentage. Actually, I think it's double digits, but I think it's like right around 10% pass rush win percentage for Keldrick Falk. You can go, how is this guy helping us on their defensive line? I actually don't hate this, guys, and the reason why is because I think Nick Scorton is more of just a pure pass rusher. Yeah. I think the same for Princely Umanmielen. I don't think these are the guys that you want as like the full-time. I don't think you want both of these guys on the edges as like your full-time edge rushers, because I don't think they bring enough in the power profile and defending the run. You can't have 2 finesse guys on each side of the line of scrimmage. You have to have a power guy to complement a speed guy. Keldrick Falk is that. Keldrick Falk is your 5 technique, length, size, power, defends the run, allows you to move Derek Brown back inside to where he can really just wreak havoc as a 3 technique defensive tackle. It allows you to then have a rotation of Nick Scorton and Princely Umanmielen as the more finesse player, sometimes a stand-up, sometimes with their hand in the dirt on the other side. So I get it. He's not the prolific pass rusher that you maybe that some fans would want, but I do think that for Carolina it does make sense. And I actually don't hate this landing spot for Keldrick Falk.
And Ejiro Evero gets in a lot of 5-man fronts too, and you talk about Keldrick Falk being able
That's
to
a 5-man front type of a player.
Exactly.
100%.
And even then you could still have in a 5-man front then Skorton, Uman Mielen, and any veterans they have on the outside to go, okay, just keep contained and funnel this back into Derek Brown and Keldrick Falk, who are such good run defenders. I think the front flexibility that comes with Falk, especially for a team that's been dying for run defense the last 2 years, I do think that's a really good fit. But Carolina's got a lot of options with that pick. D-line, if C.J. Allen was on the board, they need linebacker in the worst way. And I think the quiet need that still might be an option for them there. That left tackle spot might be a problem.
I know. Yeah, Dan Morgan was asked about Ike Ekwonu, and he said, hey, surgery was successful. It was as good as it could be. Didn't give a timetable. I mean, he's not going to play next season at all. I mean, that extensive of a knee injury with a patellar tendon tear, he's going to be out all next season. And then, you get worried about the long term with him because that's an injury that can affect you long term. So I think you are right there as well. Next 5 in the mock, we start with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mel Kiper has them taking Ty Simpson, the quarterback out of Alabama, there at number 21. Los Angeles Chargers, this is where Vega Owane, the guard from Penn State, comes off the board. Philadelphia Eagles, Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon, who we think is going to put on a show here in Indianapolis. The Browns at 24, offensive tackle Monroe Freeling, and so it was that wide receiver offensive line combination. It was Carnell Tate at number 6, and then at number 24 it's Monroe Freeling. And then for the Chicago Bears, I do like this pick quite a bit, and I'm going to start to, I think, gravitate towards this one a lot. It's Caden McDonald, the defensive tackle from Ohio State, to Chicago for a team that has to get so much stronger and so much more reliable in the middle of that defensive line there with the pick at 25. So any of those picks stand out to you guys?
Trev, you just mentioned it right there. No Bears D tackle had a 60 PFF grade, at least a 60 PFF grade.
Which is average. Which is just average.
Average, yeah. Caden McDonald led the nation in run defense grade this year. And to go back to you guys' point earlier about the Browns, I go back to a couple drafts ago with the Chargers, and everyone's like, they have to take Malik Neighbors in top 5. They have to do it. They took Joe Alt. And people were like, okay. And they got Ladd McConkey in the second round. So that's kind of building your draft through that strategy.
Right.
This I don't love for the Browns because, like you mentioned before, Carnell Tate is 6, great player, sure. I don't love Monroe Freeling at 24. But if you do, say, Spencer Fano at number 6 overall, and then Denzel Boston at number 24.
I like that a lot better.
I love that a lot better, too. So it kind of reminds me like the Chargers strategy a couple years ago where, they need a receiver. They also need help on the offensive line. In this draft, you probably, like I said before, you probably should prioritize offensive line first and then take a really good receiver later on in the first round.
Scarcity of position goes into so many of these decisions, right? Because all of these teams, that's why we do the team needs things where it's like they all have 3 and 4 and 5 needs, right? But how can we best fit this puzzle together to get all of them filled, right? And you mentioned it, and it depends, and it also depends, let's say, just how much they believe in Freeling, right? Who showed off some really good pass protection this year. I think he's probably going to test pretty well this week.
Right.
I still think there's parts of his game that are a little bit of a project right now still, especially in the run game. So I think there's a lot of potential, and again, in these front offices, it's going to depend. You mentioned even specific players in both scenarios. We don't know what some of these general managers think of those specific players and those combinations. So that's why they have to go through so many of these simulations.
What was it? Oh, I was going to ask you about Simpson. So Simpson's, the opinions on him are all over the place, but thoughts on him, independent of spot, more of like with Mike McCarthy, right? Like in Pittsburgh, at this point, they would not then have another wide receiver quite yet. We talked about them maybe being a team that gets involved in the free agent wide receiver market. But just thoughts on Ty Simpson as Pittsburgh fit.
Simpson is the second best quarterback in this draft. We got to work on some pressure things and how to respond to that. And he only has, 15 starts in his college career, right? And there's a lot of good things. I think he could see the field in a way that Mike McCarthy wants to, because I think the one thing that has to, you're going to hear about a lot, but, Ty Simpson's a coach's son. So I think that level of processing, you can see it in his tape. I would love for him to go to a situation like that. Actually, I would like it better if we know Aaron Rodgers is staying. I think Simpson's ideal scenario, especially when you talk about the Steelers or maybe the Rams, is to sit for a year. Sit behind a veteran for a year.
Agree.
He's a guy, and this is why
I want him to go to the Rams.
It's why I'm not really an advocate of him with the Jets at 16.
Because they're going to...
Who's playing in front of him, right? If I have Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh, he's playing.
Right.
Matthew Stafford's obviously playing for the Rams.
Right.
If Simpson can sit for a year, I think he can be really solid with a year of development behind the scenes.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I like him potentially with the Rams at the back end of the first round, because you get to sit behind Matthew Stafford. But I think you bring up a great point of that scenario being similar with Aaron Rodgers.
Going to the Aaron Rodgers thing, during the Omar Khan press conference today, he was even saying we are open to Aaron Rodgers coming back to the team. And he also said it's not going to take take until June to find it out. Remember last year,
right,
until after
right,
the draft, it's like,
right.
we're going to find that out a lot earlier. I can promise you that this year. So they hopefully should know his answer before the draft this year instead of after it like last year. So we should know whether or not Aaron Rodgers will be back pretty soon.
All right, so running through the last picks here of this first round from Mel Kiper, Buffalo Bills, Denzel Boston, the wide receiver from Washington. Brandon Beane was asked about Keon Coleman and where he was sort of complimentary at the beginning because he's like, oh, we want him to have an offseason like the one that he had last year, which was really promising, showing up, being about your business. But then he talked about some of like him still needed to grow up in a maturity standpoint. Like anytime you say that, it's like, all right, well, that's interesting to hear. Like that's not really great to hear. So you draft Denzel Boston at number 26 for the Buffalo Bills here in this mock draft. 49ers getting Caden Proctor.
I don't love that fit.
Okay, go ahead. Before we move on,
I just don't think
just because of Shanahan.
It's not a good scheme fit.
But Shanahan's leaning more into power stuff.
A bit, but it's not like full tilt like McVay, where now he's just getting duo all the way with guys. Like if he was going to commit to that and be like, "Hey, Caden Proctor, you're the next Kevin Dotson," then maybe I see the case.
Then maybe you're into it.
But he still wants to run to the edges, and I don't love that as a scheme fit. I would actually like him better with this next team you're about to mention.
So the Houston Texans. Then he has Jadarian Price, 2 running backs. From the same school, mind you, going in the first round of this draft. I think that's far too rich for a team that needs offensive line help more than anything else.
In that scenario, with Freeling off the board, with Proctor off the board, I think you start to get into maybe the 2 guys.
See, I don't agree because I'm a Blake Miller guy at this point. I'd very clearly take Blake Miller, and I'm cool with it.
Blake Miller, or I would take Pregnon over Miller and move Howard back to right tackle.
Ionicher is somebody who I think about here at this spot as well. I'm not thinking about a running back at 28 if I'm the Texans.
No.
I'm not doing it.
Later on, absolutely. Day 2, take it back. You got to put somebody else back there with Marks.
28.
But I think, to me, I'm with you. I think in that scenario with Freeling and with Proctor off the board, I would take Pregnon and then move Howard back to right tackle.
Blake Miller goes 1 pick after that at number 29 to the Los Angeles Rams. I love this. Blake, I've been trying to talk about Blake Miller for the last 2.5 seasons, it feels like. But he's needed to get stronger. He's needed to continue to sort of build out his body and get NFL ready. But I think that he is right now, and I really do think with Rob Havenstein retiring, they've got Warren McClendon, and maybe they think that he's the answer long term, so maybe they're not thinking offensive tackle here. But if you tell me that he's not the long-term answer, I like this idea for Blake Miller to be the starting offensive tackle.
Especially for Blake Miller, too, not like a guy like Monroe Freeling, who I think it's a little bit of a project. Blake Miller's been starting for 4 years.
He's ready.
Yes.
He's ready.
Starter
he's
at
one of the most patient pass protectors that I've watched. He's got the 35-inch arms. Like, he is built like an NFL tackle.
For a team that's trying to win a Super Bowl next year, he could start for them next
year.
Whereas Freeling maybe will take a year or two to really get going. I think Blake Miller could be a day 1 starter for
On the other side of that, though, let's say they feel good enough about McClendon to start him through that final year, but you want to take a tackle anyway. Then I might think about Freeling's
a good setup.
Or Ionicher as the more project guys who can sit behind it, and then you develop him. I think that is a fascinating part of the Rams' O-line situation. They don't have to take an offensive lineman,
but they could.
And they do have the luxury, if they wanted to take the more developmental one in Freeling or Ionicher, they could do that and stash him away for a year.
Denver Broncos, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, the safety from Toledo. New England Patriots, R. Mason Thomas, the pass rusher from Oklahoma. And then 32, Seattle Seahawks, Avion Terrell. Dog. Any thoughts there with any of those fits?
Expand on that right there.
What did you say?
I think it's the best pick of the draft, Avion Terrell, going to Seattle at 32. That is a phenomenal pick, I think, by Seattle.
Dude, Terrell.
Wasn't there a
with
name?
Devin
Terrell and Witherspoon and
in run defense, can you imagine that, dude?
Oh, 2 yards a carry they're giving up.
It's unreal. Yeah. I think Avion Terrell's worth the top 20, top 25 pick.
I agree with you. Yeah.
And for the Seahawks team that just won a Super Bowl, very few holes. One of the holes might be corner. You got a player like that who's a steal at 32. I think that's a great pick.
I think New England there in that 31 spot, there's 2 ways I would go about this pick. Either one, the way exactly like they did it, get a pure proven pass rusher like R. Mason Thomas. I think that's exactly what they're missing off the edge. They've got good run defenders, but for him to rotate for 25, 30 snaps a game early in his career while he's still getting stronger, that explosiveness off the edge is what they're missing. Or they're another team like I just mentioned with the Rams, because you have Will Campbell is staying at left tackle. Elliott Wolf said it again today. Listen, he wasn't healthy in the playoffs. That wasn't his best. Okay? And you do have Morgan Moses.
They were always giving him another year.
And you do have Morgan Moses still. This is another team where I think a Monroe Freeling or a Max Ionicher as a developmental tackle behind, say, Morgan Moses, I think that could really work for New England's future on the offensive line. But either way, I fully expect them to draft a trench player.
Yeah. All right. Day 1 recapped of some head coaches and general managers here at the podium at the Scouting Combine, and a mock draft run through there. We got through Mel Kiper's new mock draft 2.0, which you guys can see over at ESPN.com. Who am I kidding? You know who Mel Kiper is. He's a legend in the game. Appreciate everybody watching and listening to this show. We'll be here again for you on Radio Row here in Indianapolis at the Combine tomorrow with a lot more of the same stuff. We're going to be recapping a lot of what we were seeing at the podium. We're going to be talking about guys who we're excited to see when it comes to the on-field performances, the drills, all of that great stuff for everybody behind the camera putting on the show. For Max Chadwick, Dalton, Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you so much for watching this episode of the PFF NFL Show, and we will see you guys same time tomorrow. See you then.